but almost to a fault, we let them continue doing a lot of what they were doing in their hurricane world. Then we recognized that A and B was moving along okay. We'd gotten board support and we'd gotten funding, but C and D just wasn't going very well. So we had to, kind of amp up the notion that, no, we're actually serious about, consuming and decommissioning, because if all we do is add to the mess by building these enterprise services, we won't have accomplished much. It'll just be more complex than ever. So we created another, and this is on another side of the block. I mean, as you turn these blocks, we actually have a bunch of physical versions of this around. And the new ABC was awareness of the capabilities, business partnership, the courage to change, and the decisions that we make. So as you turn the blocks now, there's more than one definition of A, B, C, and D. And so the business partnership that we created around, look, you got to be aware of what we're doing. So I began to be out there like a preacher on a stump, talking about, look, the reason that we're too slow, the reason that it's so expensive, the reason that it lacks reliability is because of the complexity. And so I began to show, a simpler version of the business where customer and shipment and price and, the fundamentals of the business were not hundreds of applications that had been built over time and collected complexity, but a much more granular notion of the business that represented a solid core that you could also then deploy in a flexible way at the edge. So these ABCDs were began to be part of the mantra that kind of drive the culture, and the legacy teams began to have to be more C and D oriented. They began to have to consume customer and rate and label and address and shipment, for that matter. I mean, the very nature of what is a shipment, and clearance, and and these are really well defined in those cores that you mentioned. What these businesses and technology services, things like messaging was a technology service, security, logging, all, there were a whole array of really well architected services that people could then begin to see. And then it made it easier for participation by the larger group, because, they were beginning to think differently about what it meant to deliver business value. Did it mean that they sat there on their application vertical and sucked in requirements and managed it top to bottom, or did it mean that? And so two things were going on that were really important at the time. We were converting all these waterfall teams to agile teams, and the agile teams were then learning how to work iteratively and horizontally instead of in these big waterfall bangs. And here's where bimodal comes in. I actually think that the current so I was working with Gartner at the time and saw, fundamentally through Graham Waller and some others, what the Gartner definition of bimodal was very different than what has evolved and even what you just described. And so the original bimodal that we started leaning into was that, okay, there are certain things you have to build that are robust, call it track laying, so these big services that we were building is what we called mode one. So in other words, these are heavy lifting, durable assets that you have to build and put in place. And then mode two was the iterative nature of teams being able to move across those things horizontally and consume them, and do so iteratively and much more rapidly. So for us, bimodal was mode one, build durable assets that have the control, that have the SOX compliance, that have the revenue rigor and testing and all of the things that you need. But what mode one never had to do with us, or the first mode of buy or whatever, however, in the other version of this. It never had to do with wrapping legacy applications with, the ability to access them, because we still to this day think that that is incredibly flawed as a strategy. If you're hanging on to, your mainframe applications, let's call it, just for sake of argument, and you're wrapping them in a way that exposes services from them. So I'm decommissioning my CICS or whatever, kind of interfaces I have, and I'm making them big servers now. You're doing nothing to really get yourself ready for cloud native, web scaled application services where you can run on your own premise, you can run in a hybrid fashion in public cloud, or you can run, four walls, co-location, public cloud services, and you can distribute those services, wherever they need to be based on GDPR characteristics or whatever you happen to run across. So again, I'm stream of conscious and needing you to death here, but the reality for me is, bimodal was hugely important to us, but we thought of bimodal in building out these box top capabilities in a way that would then allow business teams, our mobility team, runs across a set of services today. I mean, we've got 4.7, 4.8 stars in the App Store, and 3.8. With that, we're top 50 business app, and it's not because we built some big monolithic app. It's because we exposed all the services that you could imagine to mobility, and we allow our mobility tribe to just iterate themselves to death, and try things, testing, and same thing for our visibility tribe. So, all the tracking applications and map level visibility and the things that are emerging out of that space are tapping into mode one services, big track lane, heavy lifting that we had to do. But now they're able to use those services and put them together in design thinking frameworks that kind of come in from the outside and say, how would you want to look at this stuff? What is it? What makes it make sense to you when you're on your phone or on your desktop or using an API, if you're a big e-commerce retailer or something. So, and it's the same services. I mean, one of the stories out there is the Walgreens story. You may have noticed that, we have 8,000 Walgreens now that are pickup and drop-off locations for FedEx. We had a disadvantage in the marketplace that, the UPS store was more prevalent than FedEx office, and we didn't have as many. And so we got this idea that we could do, based on the services, the mode one services we had built that were powering mobility and powering some of our handhelds and our, we were working on a locker and it had a package acceptance, package pickup capabilities. And so we can build a pretty straightforward little app and go, and launch this thing called OnSite that would allow us to operate inside of other retailers' facilities. Well, Fred said, well, hey, I got an idea. I know the CEO of Walgreens. Why don't we go talk to them about it? Well, 6 months after the initial conversation, we're putting out 150 stores a week. We're putting it out on a little, iPod, older iPhone sled that we've created, and they're using their photo counters, which had become more or less fallow, with the evolution of photo away from that kind of a counter. And then all of a sudden they come and say, well, we're rolling out an Android device that, that every team member in Walgreens is going to need to learn how to use. We don't want your device anymore. We want this thing to run on our device. And within 3 weeks, we were able to port the services over to the Android device. And, now if you go into a Walgreens, it's a pretty darn seamless experience. You walk in there, you can use our delivery manager application to reroute your package to a Walgreens if you're not going to be home, or, whatever. And, or if you just prefer to do it that way, and, you walk in there and those team members, whip out their own handheld and scan the package and you sign it and deliver, and it's off, and it posts in FedEx.com that, you know, you just picked up your